In this show, the Handyman pros have a conversation with Chad Carson about his current project, a complete rehab of a home that's been converted into a 3-unit apartment. Chad is an entrepreneur, writer, and teacher who used real estate investing to reach financial independence. Welcome to the Handyman Pros Radio Show, home improvement and maintenance tips from the pros. Thanks for listening to another edition of the Handyman Pros Radio Show, where our goal is to help you save time, money, and aggravation. This edition is entitled, A Conversation with Coach Carson. To help me explain, I'm here with my ever-cheerful co-host and old buddy, John. John, what's been happening this week?
Hey, Larry. Great to be back here. As you know, what both of us have been doing is we've been working on rental homes, of all things. And just recently, I don't have to remind you, we've just been ripping out carpet, and we're about to put in some new flooring in there.
Yeah, we're going to make some video of that, too, so we'll get that coming out to you before you know it. We will. So, John, we've talked a bit about rental properties on this thing, and we've kind of decided rentals aren't that much different than homeownership. What's the difference between owning 1 unit and owning 50 units?
49, Larry.
That's it.
That'd be 49.
So the reason that we talk about rental properties is basically it's just a question of scale, that if you're doing your rental properties right, you have a bit more information on what you have to do around a house. Would you agree with that, John?
Yes. Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Yeah, so it's kind of a perfect segue into our interview this week with Chad Carson. I became acquainted with Chad through the financial independence community. Chad's an experienced real estate investor who helps others get into real estate investing. He owns about 110 units in Clemson, South Carolina, and he's been in the real estate business for about 18 years. He's got a podcast, website, YouTube channel, all accessible through CoachCarson.com. We had a fantastic conversation, and here it is. All right, and we'd like to welcome Chad Carson to the show. Chad, welcome.
It's great to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being here, Chad.
So awesome. So we wanted to start off. We want a little bit of information on Chad Carson. How did you come up with the name Coach? Give us that background.
Yeah, I'm a sports nut, and I'm more of a guy. I like playing sports a lot, and in college, I was a football player at Clemson University, so I was a middle linebacker, and growing up, I played baseball and basketball, and I still play basketball. So I like sports, and I like using them as a metaphor for when you're teaching things. I just think some of the best teachers in my life have been coaches who really cared about me and hoped that I would do well and would give me 100% of their energy and effort and wisdom. And so I started, I was a real estate investor first, but I started getting into, every once in a while, people would ask me to consult with them and help them with their real estate investing, or I'd come and speak to a group. And I wasn't getting much money, but I got a little bit of money to speak here and there and do some things. And so I said, all right, I got to set up a separate business to do this. And just as a temporary placeholder, I said, I'll just call it Coach Carson because I played sports and I liked it. And the little temporary placeholder of a name stuck around, and it just sort of resonated with me and the way I wanted to be a teacher to help people and kind of channel some of my favorite coaches like John Wooden, who was a UCLA basketball coach who was really into the details and the fundamentals and how to teach things. So it's just been a fun brand to stick with over the years.
Oh, that's kind of interesting. So give us a quick promotion. So you're at CoachCarson.com, correct? And give a little bit of a description of what you do at CoachCarson.com.
Yeah, CoachCarson.com I have a blog there, so I write articles, I have a podcast, and I have a YouTube channel, so all three of those. But it's basically me sharing practical tips on how to use real estate investing to achieve financial independence. So I'm part of the online financial independence movement where people of all ages are trying to save their money, invest their money, and then try to retire early, or even if you don't retire from a job, to reach a level of financial independence where you can have some fun, you can do what matters. That's the motto of my website, to kind of solve the money thing so that you can spend your time having fun, giving back, contributing to your family, to society. So it's my way of trying to share what I've learned and what I continue to learn with other people and try to help them out.
Yeah, hopefully you're going to learn a few things from the Handyman pros, but that's a whole separate thing. We'll get into that in a little bit.
I will. I promise you I will.
So tell us a little bit about why did you decide on real estate, and just give us a little bit of background on how big your rental operation, because I know you do rental, I know you've done some flips and you've done some of that kind of thing, but tell us a little bit about your real estate operations and what you're doing today.
Right. Well, when I'm going back to graduating from college again. I was a biology major and a German minor, which had nothing to do with business, had nothing to do with real estate. But I was fortunate enough, my father down in Noonan, Georgia, had rental properties. So I was always observing it from just at home and saw what he and my mother did investing. And so I was interested in it, but I wasn't professionally interested in it until I got ready to graduate from college. And I just wasn't ready to apply to medical school, which is what I thought I wanted to do. And I was going to take a year or two break. And I started reading some books off my dad's shelf on real estate investing. And I just said, you know what? Why don't I just try this? I have nothing to lose. I really don't want to go to school again for a little while. And I just started figuring out a way if I could go make some money as a recent college grad, making some money in real estate. So that's kind of the origin story of it. I had to figure out how to make a living flipping houses, basically, because I didn't have any money at the time. But then eventually over time, I have a business partner. The two of us started working together pretty soon after that. And so that's been about 18 years now. And so the fast forwarded version of that story is we were flipping houses originally, finding fixer-upper houses, fixing them up, reselling them, or selling them to other investors. But then eventually we wanted to get into the business of owning rental properties. Instead of having to work a job, flipping, we wanted to own one thing or multiple things that would generate income on a monthly basis. And that's more what we do now. We're buy and hold landlords. We're in Clemson, South Carolina still. So we have some college student rentals, some single-family houses, and we have approximately 110 units right now that we have, and we have other people managing them for us at the moment.
Okay, so you're actually out past doing self-management, and you're into what I call having a true property manager. Right. So I originally contacted you because you have a big remodel going on right now.
That's understandable.
Looks like to me.
That's kind of the understatement of the year. Give us a description of that property, and then also we're going to put the links in the show notes for your videos in particular, so that people can actually see what this house looks like. But give a quick description verbally, so we know what this property is, about how old the property is, and so forth and so on.
Yeah, so this is a little small town next door to Clemson called Central, South Carolina. Charming little town right on the railroad track. And but we're familiar with the town. We have other rentals there. And this property we think it's late 1800s. It's kind of hard to tell. You just have to guesstimate based on construction type and the type of wood and the type of foundation, which I'll talk about in a second. But it's now a triplex. It used to be a house, and it's about 2,000 square feet. It's all on one level, but it's got a really big, tall, pitched roof in one part of it. But eventually, sometime in the past, the owners converted it from a house to a triplex. So it's got 3 doors and 3 separate apartments. And it was just a mess, though. It was really neglected in terms of repairs. Just about everything we thought had to be undone. The electrical system had all sorts of issues. The plumbing system had all sorts of issues. The foundation has issues. The roof has issues. The windows, all of it. And so we got it, what we thought was a pretty low price. I had to negotiate some. We bought it for $40,000. And we think after it's all said and done, it'll be worth somewhere in the high, like 190 to 215, somewhere in there as a full value. But we're going to have to work our tails off to get, not me literally working my tail off, but we're going to have people working their tails off, fixing this up to do all of the things I just mentioned and more. To try to get it to a rentable, we want to get it to a place where we can rent it and not have any code issues, not have any structural issues, and have a nice cosmetic place that people feel really comfortable renting. And that's what we're in the business of doing, is having a nice place that tenants want to live in and stay as long as they can. Yeah, which is a great philosophy. That's one of the things I really appreciate about how you present the rental property business, is just you treat your people as customers, not as tenants, I guess I want to say, and where you're trying to develop the people to actually want to be there and want to work with you and be reasonable. And so that's one thing that I personally, because everybody knows I have rental properties, and that's the same philosophy that we use as well. So with this small little project that you have, and again, we're going to give the links to the videos that are there. But have you come on? So you went through, and originally your first video was basically showing the property as it stands. Now you just released the demo, I think, a couple of days ago. Anyway, we've looked at that. Have you come on any surprises yet that you didn't expect? Has there been anything that's like a big reveal so far? Well, I pretty much knew we would remodel everything, so there's no surprises in terms of what I'm doing. The surprises have just been I was out of the game a little bit on some of these big remodels, so I didn't have my pencil sharpened on exactly what things would cost, and I think that's one of the bigger challenges. And it's really interesting because as I'm talking to you guys, we're in the middle of the coronavirus issue and all that, and so things are changing quickly. But as we started this project in January of 2020, we were in the midst of a really hot real estate market where it was really difficult to get any contractors to even give us an estimate. Like I was just trying to get people out there. Hey, we're going to have to replace all the sheetrock in this place. We're going to have to replace all the electrical. We're going to have to replace this. And so it was really difficult. It took us 2 or 3 extra weeks just to get contractors who were so overloaded with work to get out there. And I think that contributed partly to originally I estimated, I think I said on the video, this is going to cost over $100,000, maybe $110,000 to $120,000 was my guess, was my original budget. Although this is an investment lesson, is that I had a big margin of safety built in there. And I also have a big margin of safety in the amount of cash that I have set aside to do this project. And so if I had just set aside $110,000 to $120,000, and then now we're thinking more like $130,000 to $140,000 maybe, that's an extra $20,000 from my top estimate. If I had been operating on really thin margins of cash or is a good investment, I would have been in trouble. But I think one of the lessons I've learned over the years, obviously it's not budgeting very well, but I've learned that you have to build in a big margin of safety on your investments or your personal residence, or anytime you remodel. The bigger the remodel project gets, the more of a margin of safety you've got to build into your numbers, because it's really easy to be wrong on these big projects like this.
Awesome. So that actually, we were going to actually say, what type of advice can you give someone when you're considering this type of project? And that's a great start.
That rolls right into it.
Yeah, right there. I mean, just make sure, basically have your estimations be short, be wrong. Know that you're going to spend more than you actually anticipate. At least that's always been my experience. It seems like it never goes on time, like it should. Never goes on time, never goes on budget. Ever.
Amazing.
Chad, listening to all this, so this is a pretty extensive, comprehensive project you got going on. So there's a lot of people that are going to be involved in this, I'd imagine. And how can you tell us how you're kind of vetting, you're going through the process of hiring these contractors?
Sure. Yeah, this is an interesting process because in the past we had generally hired subcontractors, and so we would hire a qualified electrician, somebody who's got licenses to do that, who's good at it, who we can look. They have insurance. They're good. They have all the things they need. But we would hire all the pieces, all the subs out. That was just what we found to be, because we were in the business of flipping houses, and we were pretty good at project management, and so we just figured that was the best way we could add value to a project. But this one we tried. There's a little bit different. The structure of this deal is we have a partnership, and I'm just one of the partners, and so originally our intention was, when I talked to our partners, I said, look, why don't we just hire a general contractor? Pretty much because I didn't want to be the one going over there doing all this work. So it's a partnership. Hey guys, I'm not going to be putting all of it into it, but we all agreed that'd be the best way, ideally, to do it. So we went and called 2 or 3 general contractors, and their estimates were even larger. When we finally got them out there to give us an estimate, they were so busy that I think it was just one of those things like, well, if they want us to manage this entire detailed project that we're going to get in all these things that we don't understand, we're just going to shoot for the moon on the estimates. And we just got huge numbers, and even beyond the estimates, the numbers I just told you, 130 to 140,000. So we went to plan B, and that's another reason it took a little longer to get started. I went to my property manager and asked him if we could do a couple things. I said, one, I want to hire subcontractors for this project, but I don't want to be out there all the time, doing all this stuff. I don't want to be going to Lowe's and getting, because I've just got other things going on. And part of financial independence for me was not running to all these projects and doing all this. I used to live in Ecuador for 17 months and had real estate back in the U.S. So I like to be a little bit more hands off. And so I hired basically a person to be my eyes and ears and run out to the project a lot and help me go pick up materials. But then this job is going to go with subcontractors. So we hired a contractor who has his licenses and everything else too, but he's going to do foundation work. That's his job right now. He's going to do that. We hired a handyman, basically a guy we've used a lot on our rental properties, to do the demo. just to rip out stuff, put it in dumpsters, and it wasn't as much of a high skilled job in terms of needing, those licenses to do that. We're going to hire an electrician to do the electrical part. We're going to hire a plumber. We hired a roofing and siding company to do the roofing and siding. So on and on and on. That's the model now, which is it takes a little bit more effort. It takes a little more coordination. So we're doing a really detailed spreadsheet, both for the scope of work, meaning all the details of each piece of this project has a line item on the scope of work, and then there's another column with the budget. And I have a column for what I anticipated the budget being, piece by piece. And then as we go, and I'm starting to write the checks, I have a column for here's what we actually spent on each one of those things. And sometimes they're less, sometimes they're more, or often they're more, but that's the process that we go through to try to keep it organized with all these different parties coming in.
Yeah, that sounds like a very organized way to do it, because this thing can, these things can really get out of hand quickly if you don't know where your money is going and also how to do the coordination. So that's a great way to do it, that you have somebody that's kind of looking, walking point here for you.
So this is a question. So if you're contemplating a project like this, and I know that you're working in a little bit bigger scale, but how often should you actually go out and do an inspection on the project itself, in your opinion? And then is it you or and I know we had talked beforehand, but you said your property manager is going out there more than you are and still sending you a lot of videos and things like that. But give an idea of what you think is a kind of a normal idea. Like how often should you be in looking at what's going on?
I mean, if they're working out there daily, I think it's a good idea to go daily. And I don't think you need to be out there all day. And this has to do with like how involved you want to be. And I know there's going to be a range of people who are listening to this. Some people are very hands-on and much more skilled than I am. And I think both of you guys are more skilled than I am. And so, sometimes it'd be nice, like let's say you were doing a little piece of the job yourself and you could be working on things all day or here and there while the other guys are doing the foundation work or something. I mean, that's always better, because then there's always going to be questions that come up. Hey, what about this? Hey, what about that? And it's nice to be able to be there and give them some feedback. So in general, the more is better. But then you also have to balance that. If you're working a full-time job, if you got family obligations, it's hard to be out there all the time. So my philosophy right now with this is I do want my project manager out there, and I want him being seen. I want the contractors to know he's there. I want them to see he's taking videos and pictures all the time, so that they know somebody's watching. And it's not that I don't trust the contractors. You hire a contractor you trust, but I think just human motivation is if they know you care about it and if they know you're paying attention to it, they're going to pay attention to it more and care about it a little bit more. And this goes back to coaching, right? When you play sports, you don't let the players go out there and just practice by themselves. There's always somebody out there motivating, pushing, and if you have 100% effort, somebody's going to give you 90%, and they might not even realize they're giving you 90%. And so I think being present helps with that. It also helps with questions and just honest, like, hey, what's going on? What should we do here? And so I think that daily, on a regular week, at least 3 or 4 days, but maybe 5 days a week if on an intense project like this.
Yeah, and I think that's a great piece of advice, because if you don't, basically it's inspect what you expect, right? So if you're not getting out there and you're not taking a look, John and I encounter this all the time. I was just going to ask John this question: do contractors cut corners?
Yeah, sometimes, Larry.
Sometimes. Chad, have you ever had a contractor cut corners?
Yeah, I have
a couple of times.
Yeah, and just going out there often like that too cuts down on stress, because you know what's going on. If you don't follow it closely, you're going to get caught, from behind, so to speak, right? I mean, it's you got to catch things when they kind of start to veer off a little bit.
Earlier is better. Yeah.
I was going to have another metaphor, guys, on coaching, which I got to keep bringing in here. John Wooden was my coach that I mentioned earlier, was a basketball coach, and he used to drive his players crazy because he was so detail oriented. I mean, just every little thing. And he would have like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bill Walton, these all-American amazing players, and he would have them in there before their season started for an hour practicing putting their socks on and tying their shoes.
Well,
can you believe that? I mean,
but it worked, right? Did it work?
It worked. Yeah. He won championships because he was very into the details. And one of the reasons I don't do as many huge remodel projects like this is that the successful remodelers I've seen are very detail oriented to the point that it can be stressful, as I think it was John pointed out. It can be very stressful, and so you've got to love it, you've got to enjoy it, you got to want to do it, you got to enjoy that transformation process. So like we're doing a lot of one of the things that's helping me enjoy this is doing these time-lapse videos and just showing the process, because I'm a teacher, and so if I get to teach something while I'm learning, it really makes it more fun for me, and I think that helps a lot for me in my case.
You just mentioned something very interesting, and that gets overlooked a lot of times, and that is enjoy the transformation process. From a lot of folks, sometimes myself included, if I have to hire out and have some big things that are occurring at my house, you kind of, it is very stressful, but then, to your point, to see that transformation starting to take place, it really is a cool thing to see.
Yeah, it gives you a lot of pride too. We're in a neighborhood where this was the worst house on the street, and there was drug dealing going on when we bought this property. There's no doubt about it. And here we're going to transform it, and we're going to put great tenants who are responsible with good credit, and they're going to have a nice place to live. And some of the little things that really I'm proud of on this property, it's got these old, really tall ceilings. They're like 12 feet or 13 feet, and it's got beadboard ceilings. And one of the details we're trying to maintain is keep some of those beadboards and keep some of that kind of old feeling. So somebody's going to get a $650 to $700 rental, which is it's not the very bottom of the market, but it's towards the bottom of our rental market. And they're going to have 12-foot ceilings like they see on, a movie or something. And that, like, I get a lot of pride in that and in giving somebody a nice place to live. And I think that's we should enjoy that. Whether it's your own house or somebody else's house, your investment property, that's the payoff of all these details and the work you get to do.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. So, and it's like beadboard, you almost can't even afford to put it up anymore. It's so expensive. It's like, wow, whoa, geez,
That's right.
And when you open it up, I know we've done. I grew up in Western New York, and so many of the houses. In fact, the house I lived in was built in 1812. So we've seen, and I've done a bunch of remodels and just work, and it's amazing what you find under the layers sometimes. I mean, one time we stripped up carpet and there was beautiful hardwood floor under it, and I'm like, wow, why would you cover this up? But times change and things change, and in this case, I think, didn't I see a drop ceiling in this house, and they had the beadboard above it, but it was a drop ceiling.
Yes.
It was
yeah. They had the old 1980s styrofoam tile, drop ceiling, and I was almost hitting my head on it. I'm a tall guy, and then you open it up, and my project manager, to his credit, he looked up there. He's like, "Look at that beadboard! Like, that thing's 12 feet high in the air." And I said, "Oh, we've got to do that." So it's a cool idea.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So in your video, so I'm going to call you to task. In your video, I see you with a sledgehammer. Yet I never saw you swing that sledgehammer. I'm just giving you a hard time.
It was all a ploy. It was all. I had some people. I had some real handymen on YouTube call me out on that one, and I told them that my point was well taken. They're like, you don't use a sledgehammer on a demo. That's my pet peeve. He's like, you use a saw, and you do it like very calculating, and that's the waste of time to sledgehammer stuff. And I was like, you're right. We didn't sledgehammer much. It was good for HGTV lookalike kind of stuff.
Yeah, of course. I know. We
still use a torch.
Yeah, we've sort of been there and done that a couple of times. You know how it goes. So you're hiring these contractors. How are you setting the expectations in your contractors? And when we talk about that, like John and I get a lot of questions, or we see a lot of work where, unfortunately, I mean, John and I both have seen a lot of work where the contractor comes in and they either don't finish the job or they do a substandard job. And so one of our tips we're trying to get our listeners to understand is, like, how do you actually hire a contractor? We're working on a whole series we're going to do a whole series on how to hire a contractor, but we want to hear it from your perspective, because you're truly a professional. You've got 110 units, and so you've hired contractors, I'm sure, quite often. And so how do you actually like set an expectation for a contractor? Say, and I know each of the trades are different, but what's your general overall expectations in your contractors?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I've made mistakes on this a lot of times. So I'm learning. I have a lot of scars to help me learn this lesson. But I think the basics are, you just got to get it in writing.
Yep.
And I've gone different scales here. Like, I've had really detailed contracts where I bring my painter on a remodel project, this like 3-page contract with all these details, and if you don't finish by this date, you have this much penalty, and often they'll sign it, but they look at it, they're like, they just kind of read through it, and they don't get everything in the contract. And so I've kind of come back to the point where I say, I just want something in writing, and I want it as much as possible in their own words. And I want us to discuss it. And I tell my contractors, in this case, like my foundation contractor, I said, I want it in writing. I had to keep pushing for it. I want it in writing. I don't care if you put it on the back of your little, kind of estimate sheet or whatever, the 1-page estimate sheet. I just want you to write exactly what you're doing, exactly how much it costs, exactly what your estimated time frame is, and just put it in writing. And I found that to be the kind of happy medium of doing that. They sign it, they commit to it, it's in writing. There we go.
Yeah, because if you don't, Chad, they're going to present you with their contract, which is all for them. Mm-hmm. So you need, the homeowner or the investor needs a contract back a contract back to the contractor.
Mm-hmm. And the bigger the project, I think if you're a homeowner, this is your first project, having a good detailed contract if you're going to spend $50,000 or $100,000 or even $10,000 on something, it pays to have a contract. I mean, that's why in real estate, when we buy properties, we have really detailed contracts, because people have realized in the past that's the best way to go about it. It forces you to think through the details of the remodel, and it forces you to think of the what ifs, like what if this happens, what if that happens, and that's a smart thing to do, to put it in writing, and even better to have a contract. And you just have to find. To use your contract, to use the contractor's contract. That's a little bit of the give and take on how you're going to do it.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice, because what you're forcing people to do is, or not forcing, but you're thinking the process through in advance, and as they say, planning pays off in spades or through time, because there's always and there's always little things like your foundation guy. He might find some things that are surprise, right, kind of things. But at least if you have some kind of provision for that, at least you're ahead of the game. We see a lot of projects done that there's no contract, even big projects, and it's just crazy. And I mean, I've been on one project myself where the guy basically, he got to a point where he couldn't fix what was there, and he walked off the job. But he had been paid for 90% of the job, so he was like, "I'm done." And he left this huge problem for the homeowner. And that's really what, when John and I talk about this kind of stuff, we try to save people time, money, and aggravation, and that's huge aggravation. We don't want people to have to go through this kind of aggravation when you're working with a contractor, when it can be taken in advance. And I heard you talk about some things about, like in your original contractors, where they have time penalties and things like that. And those are all things for consideration. But at the end of the day, have something in writing, and make sure it's in writing. And I know this is a personal story. Having been to eviction court a couple of times, you've heard of the guy, well, we shook on it. It's like you have a lease, but you just shook on it, right? Have you heard that? Have you ever heard that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Don't do that either.
No, don't ever do that. No. No. If you want to rent properties, get a rental contract, and even if it's just off the internet somewhere, get something and get it in writing. It just is, But there's a ton of work that's done out there that's not done with any kind of written down contract. So I think that's a great tip. John, do you have? Or go ahead, Chad.
Yeah, you just brought up one other thing that I want to make sure, because I thought it was really good, that the contract is one tension point that I think a lot of contractors are going to try to push through and maybe don't do that. And so you're going to have to push back a little bit to get that contract and get it in writing. The other thing that I found, like the biggest tension point of every remodel I've ever done, has been the payment, how the person gets paid and when. And I think you got to remember, as the owner of the property, that is your only and your number one leverage of the entire project. And the biggest mistakes I've made, where we've lost money, people have walked off my job, just like you just said. I've had people walk away from, my rookie mistake my first year in business was I gave a lowest bid heating and air contractor the money up front for the materials, and he took off and went off to another town somewhere with my $2,000 or whatever, $1,500, whatever it was. And so the tension there is that ideally you would not not let the contractor get ahead of you on the job. And it's true. It's not always easy to do, but you don't want to pay them 90% when they've only done 50% of the work. And that's another reason to go out to the property a lot, is that the more you're out there, the more you're seeing it. You can ask, like, how much more do we have to go? What's still coming in? Where are the materials? Do you have the materials? There's a lot of things that can get stolen from you: your time, your money, your materials. And so the more you're paying attention to that money and to where the money's going, to the point where like I never ever outsource paying checks. Like I've had a bookkeeper for years, and she was wonderful. She just retired this year, unfortunately. So I'm doing the books again myself. But I've never ever outsourced actually writing the checks, paying people, because that process is that's how you control everything, and it's how you can get really burned as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great bit of advice. Yeah, definitely be very careful with letting you. That's that's really a great piece of advice. Don't let the contractor get ahead of you or get ahead of the job in the payment side. And I think that we've seen that in many cases in some of the jobs that we've been doing. Because we get called in after the fact, basically to fix the problems, and as a result, we're like, so where are you with your original contractor? And then the story starts. The various different stories start, and so most of them, I think it's exactly that. The money gets ahead of where the project is, and then the contractor just basically goes to another town, as you say. Yeah, that's a very, very interesting point. So yeah, really, 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 really like that bit of advice. So what other, our goal is to help our listeners save time, money, and aggravation. Are there any other action tips that you could give that might be valuable to our listeners?
I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but maybe I'll just double down on it, is that the more organized you can be with the project, with your project management, with your spreadsheet, the better off you're going to be. And this goes from a simple project of, replacing a countertop all the way to like a big, $140,000 remodel like we're trying to take on. That I think you gotta, if you're a fly by the seat of your pants type person, and even if you're good at doing that, like the more money you spend on a project, and the more you've really got to get organized, and you got to break it down. You've got to get a spreadsheet. You got to have some kind of process that you stick to. And then you also got to get organized with the paperwork. So when you get receipts coming in, it's going to be really easy to go to Lowe's or go to Home Depot or go to the hardware store, and you can have all these receipts, and you just stuff them in the seat in your car, next to your car. You can't do that. It's going to cost you later on by being a little bit lazy on the front end. And so like for me, I try to keep my system really simple. We use a online software called Evernote, where we just get an app on our phone, and every time I get a receipt, I take a picture of that, and it scans it with my phone, and the app, you can then like label that and say, this is such and such property address, here's the date, and here this was materials for the foundation repair. And now you've got it saved. You've got it labeled, and you can throw that receipt away and never look at it again. And but whatever you do, you just got to have whether you do that or you stick it in a folder and you go back and look at it later and just write down on the receipt what it was. If you can do a little bit of work on the front end of being organized, both with your paperwork, with your budget and your scope of work, it's going to pay in big dividends down the road.
Well said.
Yeah,
that happens to me just from working with different folks. With the receipts that I have, that's great advice. I try to manage all those receipts, to the job and those kind of things. And it can get away from you quick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, particularly at tax time, right? The T word. But anyway. Well, Chad, we appreciate your time. We would love to have you back on the show to do a little follow-up on your small little remodel that you're doing up in South Carolina.
Let's do it.
And but tell us a bit. How can people get a hold of you? Give us a bit about you. Tell us about CoachCarson.com. Tell them how they can get a hold of you and go from there.
Sure. So my home online is at CoachCarson.com. And if you check that out, one of the things that people do when they first land on the page, if you're interested in real estate investing, I have a free toolkit that you get that has a lot of the paperwork and the checklist and things that I use. For example, I have a closing checklist whenever you're buying a property. There's just a lot of details that happen that you want to make sure you get right when you're buying a property. So I share my checklist like on that one. I have also a worksheet that I use when I'm buying a property. When you're looking at a property and trying to analyze the numbers and use formulas, I share my formulas that I use. So if you want to get that for free, you can just go to CoachCarson.com, and then there on the front page, there'll be a place where you enter your email address, and I'll send you that toolkit.
Awesome. All right. Well, Chad, thanks for being on the show, and we look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you, John and Larry. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Chad.
I want to thank Chad for being on the show. So many great takeaways. You're going to want to listen to this show a couple of times. John, some of the takeaways?
Yeah, it was great. I really enjoyed the conversation with Chad. Very nice fellow. A couple of things. Some of the biggest takeaways I had on this was that one of the first things that struck me was in the beginning was he had a big margin of financial and time safety, because when he got into it, you can only kind of guesstimate what it's going to take. And I know that he guesstimated, I think, around 100,000, and now I think he might be up to about 140. But he had that money and the time expectation kind of stashed away just in case things, the scope kind of got a little larger in what he thought. And I think that's really good advice for anybody who's going to take on larger projects.
A bigger project, yeah. And one of the things I think that was really kind of not so much a surprise, but in these current times was the time margin, right? So some things have happened. We're in the middle of the COVID epidemic right now, and so and this is being recorded as of the spring of 2020, and so the time frames for him have just kind of been blown out the door, as they are for all of us. So I did think that was really interesting, but definitely have a big margin of both financial and time things built into your projects. What else did we come up with, John?
Yeah, the other thing that struck me, and I think it really goes to reducing stress. And anybody who's going through a big project or anything, you're going to naturally have stress, and it's be present on the job. When he was talking about visiting the job, seeing how it's going, not getting caught from behind, inspect what you expect. That needs to be happen. That you want to go on. That kind of thing, and stay organized.
Yeah,
that was another good point.
I thought those were great points. Definitely inspect what you expected. When you go on the job, it doesn't mean that you have to understand every single nut and bolt and things that gets tight and every screw that goes into the facility, but have an idea of what the flow is, and then talk to your contractors and find out what's your time frame. What are you thinking about? And then definitely Chad was all about being organized. I mean, which personally I think is a fantastic bit of advice. I mean, absolutely stay organized. Keep your receipts just to time, just to flow, to everything. Make sure you have an idea of how this thing is going, because it can get out of hand quickly. So what else did we get?
Yeah, so the other thing that caught my ear was that he said something that was that I thought was something I do, but I don't do it consciously. But I think it also goes to a stress level too, was to reduce it, is to enjoy the transformation process. These large projects can take a lot of time. They can kind of get you at your wit's end. But as you're watching things happen over time and how it's getting transformed into what you want, and you see the difference, now you should say, wow, on the other side of this tunnel, this thing's going to look great.
Yeah, it's kind of that whole thing that drives me in the handyman business, is like I get to make people happy by fulfilling their vision, right? So you have this vision of how it's going to look, and then you actually get to see it actually happen in front of your eyes. It's pretty amazing, don't you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last thing that I got, and we'll be talking about this more, was get it in writing.
Yeah, get it in writing.
You have a contract back with your contractors. And those people that are going to be working for you, because that's going to give you a peace of mind of time frame and expectations.
Yeah, definitely get something in writing, just an idea, because it's just critical to save back to saving stress. Good gosh, save yourself the stress and get something in writing. Do not do anything on a handshake, please, please, please. I mean, unless it's a very, very simple job. And then, don't, like, if you just want your fan replaced, that's one thing. But when you're into a multi-day project, you need something in writing. So, All right. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Handyman Pros radio show. Please join our Facebook page at Handyman Pros and become part of this conversation. If you'd like to contact us directly, you can send us a note through Facebook messengers, or you can send us an email at questions@handymanprosradioshow.com. John?
Yes?
Spaceship has landed.
I thought I heard that thing coming down.
Man, do we look at it?
And I got my toolbox ready to roll it out next to it. I'm taking it apart.
Awesome.